By now, a thought's probably crossed your mind. Aren't we supposed to know how much a Steam machine should cost? And the answer is, yeah, we were supposed to know, but the Steam machine was announced before the memory crisis started interfering with Valve's plans. And it's interfered with everyone's plans. PlayStation and Nintendo are both reassuring investors that they can actually secure their hardware. Nvidia are taking a different approach. If you don't announce new hardware, then you never need to secure the components. What we see is memory pricing, storage pricing, all those things have been surging across the industry for months. Thus far, it shows no sign of slowing down. And the companies driving that surge, well, they are just trying to keep their hundreds of billions of dollars in investment flowing. And that is interfering with all of our plans. Valve just gave us the clearest picture yet of how much this uncertainty is impacting gaming. In November, when the Steam machine, the Steam frame, and the new controller were revealed, they suggested we get a release date and a price in early 2026. Then, AMD CEO Dr. Lisa Su stoked speculation further. She talked about Valve being, quote, on track to begin shipping its AMD-powered Steam machine early this year. Obviously, it is currently early this year, and there's really no sign in sight. And after Lisa Su spoke, Valve stepped in to perform some damage control. A new blog post made things unfortunately clear. Basically, we don't know anything yet. Valve say they wanted us to know by now, but, quote, the memory and storage shortages you've likely heard about across the industry have rapidly increased since then. And that means Valve are reconsidering their shipping schedule and their pricing in light of the market conditions, though they're still intending to ship, quote, in the first half of the year. Now that would align with Lisa Su's comments, but it maybe isn't as early 2026 as some people hoped. Now it's not a surprise that Valve's partners with these devices aren't being left in the dark, but players are a different story. We are not going to find out about prices until the very last moment possible. And that's all because securing the components at practical prices is becoming harder and harder than ever. And it is very much not just Valve. First though, something that ties back to our previous coverage, because in this video we learned how game spending is falling, but subscriptions on games are actually rising. Too often we don't use those subs, and that's why Rocket Money is today's sponsor, because they make it easy for you to just get a handle on your subscriptions and save money. And you can get started for free today at rocketmoney.com/Bellular. Now, Rocket Money will securely and safely identify recurring charges for you. You can then just cancel them with just a few taps. They've put the work in to make the UI and everything really smooth and easy. So if this is a chore you've been putting off, just, get Rocket Money and do it. Now's the time. Now, they'll also help you with bill negotiation, where you just upload your bill and they'll be able to help you out. I mean, a personal example for me, it's my go-to is whenever my internet went to its off-contract price, I got on the phone. They initially denied me, but I was able to negotiate a speed upgrade and a halving of my monthly bill. So you can get that kind of thing too. And the thing is, I could have got that months earlier, but life got in the way. And that's the huge value of Rocket Money. They make all this stuff really easy. Now, they've cancelled over $880 million worth of subscriptions. They've helped their customers save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. They've got other great tools beyond what I've mentioned, so if you want to spend less and save more, sounds pretty good to me, join the over 10 million Rocket Money members today at rocketmoney.com/Bellular, or just click the link below. You can get started for free and unlock more features with premium. rocketmoney.com/Bellular. In both Nintendo and PlayStation's earnings calls, they talked about this whole component crisis and how much it's hitting them. For PlayStation, their CFO, Lin Tao, preemptively told investors that they've gotten ahead of the memory game. That PlayStation had managed to, quote, secure the minimum quantity necessary to manage the year-end selling season of next fiscal year. So basically that just means they've secured their supplies until April 2027, and they now have got negotiations underway for demand after that date. So that's PlayStation sorted, but over with Nintendo, their president, Shuntaro Furukawa's first question from investors was whether profitability would be impacted and whether price rises were coming. Of course, we all know that, kind of unlike a lot of other companies, Nintendo don't really want to sell their hardware at a loss. They like to make margin on everything. It's why their devices have historically been so tightly cost controlled, often to their detriment, looking at new Nintendo Switch. But he did explain that in the third and fourth quarters, they didn't see any impact on profitability and no price rises were planned. But he did suggest, quote, if this rise in component prices lasts longer than expected and runs through the next fiscal year and beyond, it may put pressure on profitability. So what that means is, if you're considering buying a Switch 2, you are probably fine for the near future, but we don't know how things are going to be after that. And to be in an industry where our consoles are getting more expensive over time is just insane. That is completely unlike really any other hardware cycle. And it's all because right now, the short term is relatively stable. That's because contracts have been established and those contracts will be met. All these companies already secured their supply before this whole shitstorm happened. At least the massive volume manufacturers like PlayStation and Nintendo. But as the component manufacturers are getting more and more opportunities to guarantee data center contracts and more profitable production, well, their priorities are shifting. And that, unfortunately, may be a long-term change. So to translate that into what will matter to us, well, both the console manufacturers and their players are becoming lower priority to the companies who fundamentally make the hardware. And that means that the big businesses that the likes of us are used to are just small fry when compared to the AI boom. As an example, just take a look at the xAI Colossus 2 data center. It's planned, it's not like being built yet, or maybe it is being built, but it's not going to be coming online for a while. But the size of that thing boggles the mind, and there are further and larger data centers planned. So with that in mind, why would Nvidia go the entirety of 2026 without releasing a new graphics card for the gamers? The answer is fairly obvious, but according to the information, citing two sources, the 5070 Super that everyone expected to see at CES has been indefinitely delayed. So yes, it seems that the rumor cycle for that thing teased people and teased people and teased people, and now you're all blue balls, then you'll probably have to buy a card that won't be as good of a deal as you hoped. Which blows. And basically, the GDDR7 memory that would have powered that card is simply too valuable to use on something for the gamers, because it can go in a data center GPU. And that actually is just the start, because there's a suggestion that the planned production run for Nvidia's next generation, the 60 series, may not begin in 2027 as planned. There's simply no way to guarantee the component contracts will be in place for the next 2 years. But what about the people who are locking down those contracts? Well, they're getting into pissing matches with each other across the press, which is at least kind of funny. So thus far in the video, almost nothing we've talked about is actually about producing the components. It's all about the contract, right? It's about companies locking down manufacturing windows at affordable prices, trying to predict demand, and of course, especially doing that for AI data center production. So when Nvidia seemingly reneged on a $100 billion deal with the ChatGPT people, OpenAI, alarm bells started ringing. So the Wall Street Journal broke this story, and basically, the memo of understanding, which was signed back in 2025, was that Nvidia would invest $100 billion into OpenAI, and that would help pay for 10 gigawatts of compute, all running on chips leased from Nvidia. Now, you did follow that correctly. It did look like Nvidia was spending money that would go straight back to Nvidia. And since then, Nvidia have seemingly tried to cool the deal at that scale. Reuters cited 7 sources saying that OpenAI weren't happy with Nvidia's chipsets for the type of processing they actually cared about, which is part of why they're seeking deals with other manufacturers. And that is where things get really interesting. As an example, like Grok. They build dedicated inference hardware, so essentially purpose-built chips that can outperform, say, Nvidia GPU at some of the data center specific tasks. You could perhaps think about this as being similar to when Bitcoin mining, or just crypto mining in general, shifted off being done on GPUs and started being done on ASICs, which basically were just more fixed function hardware to solve those specific problems. Right? So that's the sort of thing that could interrupt Nvidia's business. And if you take a look at the rest of the industry, well, one of the big strengths that Google have got over OpenAI is Google's TPUs. They can run loads of Gemini inference on their own hardware, and that opens up a lot of opportunities. So reasons like that are why OpenAI were maybe not particularly thrilled at the Nvidia offering. And it's likely why Grok spelt with a Q, so a different grok to, the one on Twitter. It's why they were apparently close to finalizing a deal with OpenAI. And then Nvidia sniped them, hiring their talent at a reported cost of $20 billion. So yeah, that's basically acquiring a direct competitor before they could lock in a major client. In reaction to this, stock prices dropped, and what followed was nothing less than collective performance art. Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang recalled the reports as complete nonsense about, reneging on the deal, and he doubled down on how happy Nvidia was with OpenAI. Sam Altman did likewise, saying that he doesn't get, quote, where all this insanity is coming from, because Nvidia makes, quote, the best AI chips in the world. Even OpenAI's other investors like Oracle began to performatively, and seemingly unpromptedly, making statements about how this whole thing would have zero impact on their relationship and how they were, quote, highly confident that the company could still raise money and meet its commitments. But what we're mostly seeing here, right, is a bunch of publicly listed companies and their chosen cash cows circling the wagons, trying to protect their investments and their stock price. Because rumors like this spook investors, and that is not great for companies who are trying to monetize niche research and limited use cases in a way that justifies absurd valuations. Some have suggested that all of this chaos will mean more options for players like you, that there can be chaos, a bubble can burst, and then there's some, creative destruction that's good for the consumer. And that very often is the case. But here, it doesn't seem likely. You need to understand that the scale we're dealing with here is truly gargantuan. Multinational corporations making deals for hundreds of billions of dollars, all to keep components flowing into data centers that have not yet been built. Now, a normal use case, like, for example, buying memory to produce consoles or Steam machines, maybe 10 million Steam machines if you're gonna have a crazy big number, that's still minuscule in proportion. And Valve are in a particularly messy position here, because Steam machines, like Steam Decks, are sold directly from Valve's store. They won't be mass marketing the devices, they won't be produced in such a similar way, in the way that, say, Nintendo and PlayStation can for their things. And that means Valve are going to be requesting less product, less manufacturing than the likes of PlayStation. You see, PlayStation are guaranteed the components that they need through to next April because they've already signed those contracts. And in this quarter alone, they sold like 8 million consoles. That's even on a declining trend. Still 8 million. By comparison, Valve are estimated to have sold around 4 million Steam Decks over 3 years as of early 2025. And I'm sure that number is a good bit higher now. But as you can see, the gap in leverage between Valve and a Nintendo or a PlayStation is huge. And it means that Valve cannot use scale to keep prices down. And unlike some of those other products that could be seen as a loss leader, or maybe the Steam Deck, which really will, in the most case, only be used for buying things on Steam, the Steam machine is just going to be a desktop computer that can do things. If they were to sell that at a loss, they would get eaten alive by business customers who are not interested in buying games on Steam where Valve gets a cut. So long term, Valve needs to secure contracts to properly price their products, and that means muscling their way into a market that is far more interested in the other, larger players that are flush with cash and are literally dumping that cash into the likes of, say, the Nvidias and the memory suppliers, not just so they can have the gear that they need, but so that they can get the contract so that one of their opponents doesn't. Remember the headlines of our good friend Sam Altman securing like 40% of the DDR5 supply for the next few years, I think until 2028? Yeah, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, that won't help us. The downstream impact then. For you and me, this likely means it'll be a while before we hear Steam machine pricing or a release date. That's just like how we're unlikely to see commercial PC part prices ease up. That probably won't happen. You're probably not going to see a 5070 Ti anytime soon, or even a 60 series. Estimates suggest that this surge may continue, and those estimates exist even though the cracks in the huge AI investment narrative that have been covered in this video are, still sort of priced into that expectation. Because yeah, a lot will be wasted, but the bet is that the stuff that actually works will be worth it. And you can maybe see in some use cases, like some coding, engineering stuff, and a few other use cases, really instances where the AI stuff can be fairly useful. Just that, the infinite slop feed of Sora is probably not one of those things, yet it still takes a shitload of data center to serve, so it's messy. And I'd say here's the part that should probably make you angry. A third of users have no interest in the AI features on their devices. You can't buy a graphics card because of demand for a product that a third of consumers don't actually want. The bickering and maneuvering that we're watching is the dominant manufacturers reckoning with that reality. And when the consequences of all this circular funding popping up the stock market finally hits, the impact won't stay contained to the companies that built this house of cards. It never is contained. That's going to hurt everyone. Because look, what if you're invested in the S&P 500, maybe as a part of your pension fund? Well, that thing may experience some issues because of the amount of top concentration within the index that has been driven by a lot of these companies, like your Microsofts and your Nvidias. Now, this is not me saying it's a total waste of time. As an example, take a look at the dot-com bubble. The dot-com bubble happening did not mean that the internet was useless. It meant that the ways in which the internet was being used, or was planned to use by a bunch of those companies, was useless. A lot of that stupid investment blew up and went nowhere. The internet continued on and was extremely useful. Now, be it in the form of large language models, diffusion models, any of that stuff. There probably are going to be a great many use cases for this technology. I think we're seeing some early signs of that right now. Hint, it's probably not you having a Copilot button on your computer. That a bubble is probably here and will probably burst doesn't mean that some of that technology is not useful in the future. It doesn't mean that it won't grow big in the future. But what it does mean is that right now, there's a lot of speculation on where the value will be. A lot of that speculation is going to be misplaced. And that's going to mean you can't buy a GPU because countless acres of land crammed with GPUs are being used to make slop videos on Sora. Something which I think is fundamentally useless. Yeah, it's kind of shit for gaming actually. There's no real way to get around that. But hey, they do have all these data centers full of GPUs. I guess they can just rent those GPUs back to us in the form of game streaming. You'll own nothing and be happy. That's it for this video. See you next time. And, I don't have a smooth segue. Watch this video next. It'll be interesting.